I'm very happy today to be talking with you particularly about the Study Australia Showcase. So the Study Australia Showcase is a platform that we've developed, a face-to-face environment for students, their parents and school counsellors to get together in a warm, friendly, face-to-face environment with Australia's leading education institutions. So we'll be bringing 26 Australian universities together here in Chandigarh. We'll be bringing our states and territories government representatives, as well as the Department of Home Affairs, Department of Education and the Department of Australian Trade and Investment, the Australian Trade and Investment Commission. So for us, starting off in Chandigarh is a really important thing. We have 6 of the showcases taking place right across India, one in Sri Lanka and one in Bangladesh, but we will be beginning here in Chandigarh. We are really looking forward to being able to speak directly with students and their families, as well as counsellors, about the aspiration to study in Australia and to really take the everything that an Australian education has to offer. You might have noticed that Australia and India have a very close relationship at the moment. There is an incredible bilateral relationship that's underpinned, I think, by a very close relationship between your Honourable Prime Minister and our Prime Minister Albanese. This relationship has really been fundamental in delivering on a comprehensive strategic partnership, of which we have now an economic cooperation and trade agreement signed at the end of last year. These are indicative, I think, of the warmth in the bilateral relationship, the warmth between Australia and India. But education has been particularly a strong theme in these discussions. Earlier this year, our government signed a mutual recognition of qualifications mechanism, which not only makes it easier for students to travel between Australia and India in their study and take the qualifications with them, but really is an important indicator, I think, of the esteem in which each country holds the other's education system. So for us in Australia, we're very, very proud of the quality of our education system. It is one of the best education systems in the world, and I talk about our education system rather than just speaking about our institutions, our qualifications or the experience, because it is the bundle that matters. Australia's education system is one that is very tightly regulated in order to protect international students. So our international education offer is one that is world leading. We have a piece of legislation called the ESOS Act, which protects the rights of students and gives international students the confidence that when they come to an Australian institution they will be cared for and they will be protected, and that the universities will take responsibility not just for the students' successful completion and progress, but also that they have a great experience while they're there. So the education system in Australia has delivered some fabulous things for us and for Australia and India in education. I guess firstly I should talk about our educational institutions. We're a country of something over 25 million people. We're a small place. We only have 43 universities. But these universities are absolutely world leading. We have, in the latest QS rankings, we have 3 universities in the top 20. We have 9 in the top 100. And all but a handful are in the top 500. This is an extraordinary outcome for a small nation, and it's partly due to the recognition of the value that Australian education places on things like employability. So the latest QS rankings changed the weighting in order to put greater emphasis on employability for students, and it's partly as a result of this that we've seen some significant shifts in our university's placement in the global rankings. Our institutions are very keen to focus on employment within education, in industry placement, but also the courses on offer are responsive to industry demands. So our courses are very often created in collaboration with industry. Students have a chance to work with industry while they're studying. And then once they complete their study, they're given the opportunity to remain in Australia to engage in areas so that they can practice, have an opportunity to become a global student. I wanted to talk a little bit about that offer for students because it's something that will be interesting to students and their parents when they come to visit. I think we have seen in the past year or so, and certainly since I was last here that first time here in Chandigarh, we've seen some major differences in the way that students and their families are engaging with both the image of Australia and with Australian education itself. Certainly we saw a real rebound, a very fast rebound in students returning to Australia. So at the beginning of COVID, when Australia's borders shut quite firmly, many students from around the world were going to their home country. For us in Australia, 80% of our students from India remained. They stayed in Australia, we looked after them, our borders were firmly closed, but these students stayed on and have had great success in completion of their studies. Once our borders opened, we rebounded almost immediately to our 2019 numbers. We saw that Indian students were very loyal to Australia, had heard about the experience of students who'd stayed and were keen to return. So this return immediately post-COVID, we've now seen really stabilise and we've continued with really significant growth in interest in Australia as a destination. I think this is partly fuelled by this possibility of seeing Australia as a destination, as a nation. So Australia as an education system and Australia as an education offer. It's inclusive, of course, of the great qualifications and the great institutions, but it is a recognition that in Australia we do have a very high quality system that enables students to have confidence in the qualifications that they'll be delivered, and also the experience that they'll have while they study with us and then beyond. This year too, we've seen some raised visibility for Australia in education in the approval of 2 foreign campuses here in Gift City and Gujarat. So the announcement that Australia will have the first ever foreign campuses in India has been significant, and again it reflects the confidence that the Indian government has in the Australian education system in this reciprocal way that we are now engaging. So the Study Australia Showcase then is an opportunity for us to bring this understanding, this recognition of Australia as a great place to study, as well as a great education system to people here in India. We'll launch here in Chandigarh on the 4th of September, and we'll run across 8 cities, 6 of them in India, 1 in Sri Lanka and 1 in Bangladesh over the coming 2 weeks or so. Many of the students, when they're sitting speaking to the university representatives, will ask questions that mostly relate to the quality of the education provider, the choice of the education qualifications, the experience that they will have when they're in market, when they're in Australia studying with us, and then finally the opportunities for them to work, both during their study and afterwards. So, with your permission, I might just run through some of the answers that might bring. So, and the costs too. Yeah, I can do that too. I can make that the 5th. You're right. Okay. Now I'll have to see if I remember what the 5 are, and Ashish will help me if I forget. So the first is about Australia as an education destination, where they'll study, which institutions they'll study with. I've talked about the quality of our universities, and students are often interested to find that Australian universities are overwhelmingly comprehensive universities. So each of our universities will have a full suite of programs from which students will study, and these different disciplines will be positioned differently in the World Universities rankings. And all of our universities will have profile in one of the disciplinary areas in the top 100 of universities around the world. They'll also be interested in the location of study, and for the showcase this year, our states and territories governments will be joining us. So students can learn about the states and the cities in which they'll study. In India, of course, Melbourne is very well known as a great place to study. Increasingly, Sydney is getting that profile. We're seeing lots of interest now in Adelaide, across in Perth and up in Brisbane. And some of these areas, the smaller cities, are ones that attract longer post-study work rights, and this is having some impact on students' decision making as well. Every one of them fabulous institutions. So there will be people here from all of the locations across Australia to talk about the place of study. In terms of the courses that are under offer, we've seen traditionally that students from India have chosen to study in management and commerce, in engineering, and in IT. But increasingly we're seeing students mixing that up. We're seeing students who are interested in studying interdisciplinary courses and beginning to build in some of the humanities into their courses of studies. So studying both in the sciences and the humanities, really learning about critical thinking, new ways of engaging for the future of work. And again, our institutions will be here to guide students on what's required for entry to those courses, what they anticipate seeing in those courses, and what career roles they would go into at the end of those courses. The students will probably at that time be interested in opportunities for internships, and they'll learn about Australian universities' commitment to engagement with industry in the design of courses to make sure that students leave their degrees work ready and ready for the future of work. And then the students and their families will probably be interested in learning about working while they study and when they finish. And recently there's been some changes to the answers that our institutions will give here. So on the 1st of July this year, the Australian government introduced a cap on working hours for students so that students can work 48 hours in any fortnight while they're studying. So while school term is on, the students are going to classes, they'll be able to work what equates in Australia to 3 days of work. So 3 lots of 8-hour days while they're studying full time. During their breaks, of course, they can work in their jobs in the way that they wish to. A really important change has also happened, though, in our post-study work rights. So Australia has, as you probably know, some of the world's most generous post-study work rights. And recently there's been a lot of work by the Australian government to understand where is the most opportunity for students to have access to work in their specific area of qualification once they finish their study. And the Australian government has listed a long list of qualifications that match with Australia's skill demand that would provide the most opportunity for students to be able to work in their field of study once they graduate. And for this very long list of courses, students now are able to access an additional 2 years of post-study work rights. So for a bachelor degree where a student might have stayed on for 2 years to study after their graduation, for this list of courses, students in the bachelor course will stay on for 4 years. For masters, it moves from 3 to 5. For doctoral students, from 4 to 6. And if students are studying in a regional area, like some of those I mentioned before, they will have an additional post-study work period of 1 year. So we're talking about for particular opportunities for students to work in an area of skills demand, post-study work periods for up to 7 years now. So this is an important change, and the university representatives that the students and their parents will meet with will be able to guide the students to those courses and to see if it aligns with their previous experience and with their ambition once they leave college as well. I think the final point was cost. We used to come to events like this and say, in Australia, a student would expect to need about, a number, $21,000, $23,000 a year, in addition to their fees. But now we have a much more sophisticated tool, and we have a fabulous digital education hub that was designed for India on the Study Australia website. So if you go to Study Australia /India, you'll find a welcome page for India, and in there you'll see a number of tools. One of these tools is a cost of living calculator. So students can go into this calculator, they can put in the city, they can put in the information about the course, and where they'll be living or where they expect to live, whether family or otherwise. And this cost of living calculator will calculate by city how much the student will need. It's a really important part of families' considerations when they're looking to study around the world, and we think that having better information like this tailored to the absolute location of study is the best way for students and their families to make those decisions. When making calculations about the cost of living, I think there's many considerations that families will want to weigh up, including whether the student will or won't work while they study, whether they will or won't stay on for post-study work rights, for example. But this tool enables us to be able to, for families to sit down and do that in quite a sophisticated way.
What is the position of inflation in Australia? And because that's a major consideration now.
Yeah, it
in
is.
Canada, in US,
it is.
In UK. So a lot of people are contemplating whether to go or not.
Yeah.
Because of the cost of living now
Yeah.
having increased a lot. So what is the position like? What is the inflation rate in US? What is the unemployment rate also?
Okay. The cost of living crisis that we're seeing around the world is one that we are hearing some of that narrative within the press in Australia. We were very lucky coming through COVID and coming out of COVID that we were able to maintain quite sensible periods of growth. I'm fluffing a little bit because Ashish is just getting the numbers for us. I think our inflation rate at the moment is 7%. And our unemployment rate, I saw recently, is still low, but it might be approaching 7% as well. But I can check that. Well, Ashish will check that for us now. 3.6%. Oh, sorry, it's 3.6% unemployment rate in July. 3.6%. 3.6. Yeah, sorry. 3.6% in July 2023. Thank you.
What's the number of students going to Australia? And what has been the trend?
Yeah, thank you. So we've been seeing an increasing number of students seeking to study in Australia. Of course, the number of outwardly bound students overall is growing in India, but we've been seeing some significant progress, notwithstanding 2 years in COVID where we were shut. But in the last couple of years, I mentioned that we saw a very strong rebound coming out of COVID, so that in 2022, for the full year, we saw 70,000 new students come to Australia to study, making the total number of Indian students in Australia about 100,000. This year, between January and May, we'd already seen nearly 50,000, 47,750 students arrive with us in those first 5 months. So the number has remained, total students has remained around 100,000 students, but we expect by the end of this year that the number will have surpassed the 70,000 that we saw last year.
You told us about the sectors in which the students go and take admission to. Yes, hospitality is still there, and
yep.
I used to be quite popular.
Yes, yeah, and it remains popular. From India, we have our top half dozen or so for higher education. So if I talk about university education, management and commerce is first, IT second, health is third, which is great for us. Engineering and related tech is fourth, and society and culture is fifth. I was talking earlier about increasingly we're seeing students who are taking courses in the humanities and bringing science and humanity together. So society and culture is growing. We have the sciences after that, education, architecture, and then dual qualifications, all in the higher education space. We do see within the vocational education and training space an interest in hospitality, and certainly there are opportunities for skills development and for post-study employment in hospitality. But for higher education, these are the areas in which we see strongest demand.
The ratio of men, women, students?
Yeah, we still don't have enough women from India. We still have it's still a little bit disproportionate. So about 60% of our students coming to Australia this year, so new students this year, about 60% of them were male, and about 40% were female. One of the things I would say is that the ratio is growing for women, and it's partly due, I think, to the fact that there's increasing recognition of the safety of Australia as a destination for study. It's really important to families when they're sending their young women abroad that they have confidence in to the place that they're sending them, and I think this is the reason we're seeing that significant growth.
Which part of India, specifically this region, Punjab, Haryana, Himachal, North India?
Yes.
What's the proportion?
Yeah. We don't have this data. So we don't have access to the data that would let us know region by region. Sorry.
Those two states.
For those two states.
Yeah. Punjab and Haryana are the main two states from this region.
Right. Oh, I see, within the region. Excuse me. So we don't have the data about the proportion of students from India heading to Australia from region by region. I think that that's quite closely held within government departments. But we do know that the Punjab and Haryana region is a really important region for us in Australia. We get a good number of good quality students from this region, and from the north, this is one of the areas that has the most students flowing through to us, but I don't have the data on that, I'm sorry to tell you.
You don't have a campus? Foreign campus?
Not yet. Not yet. We don't have a foreign campus yet because foreign campuses aren't fully allowed by the government outside of Gift City yet. But there is a new bill coming through, the Foreign Campus Bill, that the UGC has put up, and we're expecting to see that convert. We've had a lot of interest from Australian universities once that bill has been passed, and we do hope that again Australia will have one of the first, if not the first, foreign campus in the domestic zone in India.
And one of the recent media interactions with one of the immigration companies, take students there. They had mentioned that one college campus is opened up in Gujarat or something.
That is
Australia.
Yes, so in Gujarat we have two universities. There's the there's the Deakin University and then University of Wollongong. They've both been approved. Deakin University has already got half a building there in Gift City, and University of Wollongong is progressing really quickly. I hear that they're currently recruiting for a principal for that university campus, which is very exciting for us. One of our institutions, UTS, has recently signed an agreement for an affiliation with an institution up in Gujarat as well, but that's of a different format. It's not a foreign campus establishment. Yeah. It's exciting nonetheless.
Sorry, did you finish?
Yes.
Yeah, every Punjabi boy or girl, they want to go to Canada to study, settle or whatever.
Right.
Why is Canada is the first destination? Where does Australia figure in this? Have you tried to
I normally don't comment on other nations. What I can say is that India is I'm learning after 2 years here, India is a very complex place, and there are different ambitions and different expectations for students as they go to travel abroad. There's also different family networks and diaspora groups that may be attracting families from this region. In Australia, for example, we have an Indian diaspora in which almost 1 in 20 people now in Australia has Indian heritage, which is fantastic. So we have a very large and strong Indian diaspora. I can imagine that may play into the Canada offer as well. But we see, Canada having a fabulous education offer for students right across the world, and that India has been Canada has been a very popular destination for Indian students. But we know also that Australia is doing very well in its visibility, so we see that the US, the UK and Australia are drawing students from right across India very, very strongly, and from this area too.
Successful Indian Australians, maybe you can
Pardon me?
talk about successful Indian Australians as well.
Yeah, okay, and that is a really important point. Ashish has just reminded me. So we know about the diaspora, Indian diaspora in Australia is a very successful group. So there's a fabulous report that was issued by Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in about 2020 called India's Diaspora in Australia. And in this report, there's a couple of key facts that are really important. One is the sheer number of people who have from India who call Australia home, but the second is about the prominence of Indian diaspora in Australian business. So we know that the Indian diaspora in Australia is younger, better educated, and better paid than the average Australian, which is a great indicator. But we also know that many Australian institutions, our big businesses, have successful Indians at the helm. And so the access for engagement in India is very good because our decision makers in large industry are themselves Indian diaspora. So it's something that we recognise, and Ashish and I in our role in generally promoting Australian and Australia trade are accessing that diaspora quite strongly. Similarly with our successful alumni, both here in India and in Australia as well. Those successful students who remained in Australia have gone on to be very prominent figures in Australia.
One question about scholarships.
Yes.
Since we have a strategic partnership with Australia now,
Yes.
Are you offering a certain amount of scholarships exclusively for Indian students?
Yes.
Which European Union is offering.
Yes.
Not many people.
Yeah. So as part of the economic cooperation as part of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, the Australian Government announced the release of some Maitri scholarships and fellowships. These are being managed by the Department of Foreign Affairs, and the detail of those have yet to be announced. But it is a special package of scholarships called the Maitri scholarships, MAITRI. Otherwise, though, Australian and there are a number of research funds that are available specifically for India and Australia research. Many of the Australian universities, though, will have allocated specific scholarship amounts for students from this region. And so, again, when students come for the Study Australia Showcase, the universities will be able to speak to them about those opportunities as well. We also have a fabulous mobility program called the New Colombo Plan. And this is a different kind of a mobility project. It's funded for Australian students to come into India. So it's not answering your question, but I guess I want to bring it up to demonstrate the way that Australia is invested in human connection, like people-to-people links. So while Australia will go to India and offer students the opportunity to come and study in Australia with us, the Australian government also funds opportunities for students in Australia to come and study in India. So all through South and Southeast Asia, but increasingly we're seeing really strong interest from students from Australia who'll come here and engage with Indian students at Indian institutions. We've got a great example with TIFF, with Monash and Monash University and Tata Institute of Social Sciences down in Mumbai. And increasingly build the people-to-people links, but also to give Australian students good access to the amazing quality institutions that are available here in India and really begin to stimulate this kind of two-way exchange.